Now, let me get started with introduction. I usually do a poor job at introductions, but I'm going to give it a try. So at that end, we have Aaron. Aaron is the founder of Kegs Pilates and has grown the franchise to 55 studios internationally with $20 million per annum. And he has just an amazing list of accomplishment from awards that he's won: Service Business of the Year in 2014, Australian Startup Awards, multiple startup company Smart 50 awards. The list goes on, and the Australia's top 30 franchise executives in 2019. Then we have Fiona, who's been the founder of multiple startups right here in Australia. To name some of them: Startup Hub, Art Hub, Screen Hub, Remessenger, and currently she comes back from a broadcaster background from working with ABC Radio, and now she's a founder of a company called EdSmart, which does a lot of work on education and modernizing the education industry. And last but not least, but we have Omer, who is the CEO and co-founder of Vervu, an amazing startup backed by some also amazing companies like Seek, raised multiple millions of dollars, and with a strong focus on AR-powered skill testing platform, which is basically a HR tech. Now, I do apologize for the poor job, as I mentioned. Is it possible for you to maybe give a 30-second quick intro as well? And anything that I missed that you think would be relevant? Aaron, you wanna go first?
Sure. It's a good thing you're in a franchise business when the PR gives stats that then things have changed, because now we're at 60 studios, 25 million last financial year, which is fun. But so Kegs Pilates, we're Australia's first high-intensity reformer Pilates company. Started in 2010, had 6 company studios until 2013 when I franchised the business, mainly because we realized that clients who were ambassadors of the brand and also trainers wanted to get involved and have their own thing. So I learned firsthand in London that when that happened, they went out and did their own thing and became competition. So franchising to me was the perfect avenue to take these people down that path.
Awesome. Fiona?
I'm the co-founder and CEO currently of EdSmart, and we're on a mission to take school administration worldwide digital. You might think it's already digital, but it's really not. If you go inside a school, you'll find most of the administration function is either run on paper or bespoke databases, and there's no data integration with the main systems in a school. So we're changing that. We have 400 schools with us already. We're just about in the final stages on a ministry deal that will triple the size of our schools customer group in the next couple of months. And yeah, onwards and upwards.
Exciting. Thank you so much. Omer?
Yeah, so I'm Omer, co-founder and CEO of Vervo. Our mission is to make hiring about merit, not background. What we do is show companies how candidates perform job-related tasks. So we make it about, can you do the job, not how good do you look on paper. And we deliver that through a skills assessment platform, and we use machine learning technology that we develop to automatically grade and rank candidates based on how they perform tasks. We've been going for nearly 3 years. And yeah, it's been a great journey. I'm sure we'll talk about some of that today.
Yeah, definitely. So the topic of the event is mistakes that you've made during the process of growing these companies. I first want to maybe start with how you would define growth, right? Because a lot of people have different definitions, especially in the early stages. People look at number of headcounts, look at revenue, look at, there are different numbers that people would consider as growth, right? So maybe Fiona, with yourself, how do you define growth?
Oh, that's really tricky. I don't use headcount because I really would be happy if we could run 1,000 schools on the current size team that we have, which we can't. When we have 1,000 schools, we'll need a couple more customer service and customer success people. For me, it's more growth is around being able to get past that point where you've solved the major problems involved in taking your mission out there, and you truly have key components in place so that you can scale. And we're not actually quite there yet, but we've gone an interesting route. We've gone 3 tiers. So we created a universal technology that's a generic solution to solution to a universal problem is what we created, which meant that we could go into any school system in the world and still be relevant, and our technology could be deployed there. So we're a little different. Growth for us is we use single school sales to prove the concept and to get people using it and to get customer feedback. We then went and got a couple of network customers. So one was a 160 school group. And the next, as I said, I can't say who it is, but we have a ministry deal that is just, the deal is done. We just have to prove the pilot and put it to bed. But with that, for us, growth for me was proving those 3 things. The technology could be deployed into those 3 market segments. Like, we're now at the point, I think, we could do a super big deal, like integrate to, let's say, a student management system in China or similar, and maybe be white labelled inside someone else's platform. For me, that's growth. And not so much revenue, because our revenue is lumpy, but when we have deals of that scale, obviously revenue scales off a non-linear base.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Aaron, what about you?
Personally, growth, different for personal and business, I suppose, but actually they kind of intertwine. Personal growth for me is being better tomorrow than you were today. KX stands for the Kaizen experience. So Kaizen, obviously the philosophy of small and ongoing improvements, which is run throughout our business. So if the people are growing and developing, the business is growing and developing, obviously it's easy to say headcount, but our retention is really, really important as well. Growth of studios in the business, but saying that sustainable growth. We never want it to be, everyone asks what's the number, how many are you going to get to when you've got other studios out there, the F45s of the world doing hundreds and thousands of studios, but we don't necessarily look at the growth of studio count. We look at the opposite way in terms of we don't want to shut any down. So it's just a very, very different mentality of looking at it. It's quality, recruitment, it's great people, and growing probably a bigger family, and then everything else kind of comes from that.
Gotcha. Amr?
Yeah, so I think there's the dictionary version of growth, which is bigger. And there's growth as a methodology, which is growth in the North Star metric. And I think of it in terms of phases. So there's a phase pre-growth, which is you're trying to figure out if you're solving a relevant problem, and you're doing that in a non-data driven way. You're doing customer development, which is what founders do. You're trying to answer the question of, is this thing that I've built, does someone want it? Is it relevant? Does it solve a problem? And once you understand that and you've validated that someone cares about the problem you're trying to solve, and they value it and they're prepared to pay for it, and you understand what they care about, and the way to judge that is, would they be disappointed if they couldn't use this? You can turn on growth. And then that means using data to essentially scale your North Star metric, which has to be directly related to the problem you're solving. So there's no point achieving growth and not solve. If you achieve growth without solving your customer's problem, very quickly it'll be a house of cards, and you'll experience this wonderful thing called churn in SaaS, which is basically losing all your customers. And so if you turn on growth too early, you're scaling the wrong thing based on the wrong signal. So I see growth as understanding the signals that your customers are sending to you around, we solve a relevant problem, we know how, we know why, and then being able to scale that and do that again and again and again.
You mentioned North Star a couple of times. Just for, if somebody doesn't know what that is, can you maybe give us an example?
So for Instagram, it's sharing a photo. That's what Instagram does.
And they're like pushed to grow that number specifically, right?
More people sharing photos. If that stops, goodbye Instagram. Okay? And for us, it's candidates completing tests. That's it. They're not our customer, our customers' companies. But if candidates stop completing tests, our customers get no value. Now, it's not the only metric that matters. There's 12 other metrics that matter. But there's one that really is kind of fueling our business, and it's kind of the health check. If that's not happening, then something's wrong. People aren't using the product. So why do we exist? What's the fundamental thing, fundamental purpose that we serve? And is that happening? Okay, and there's a lot of things that are around that and complementary, but there's got to be a purpose. And in platform methodology, it's called the core transaction, the core thing that you're supposed to. And Instagram is a platform, and that's what people do, share photos.
Cool. Let's talk about we defined growth. Let's talk about in your journey. When you think about growing your own business, what are some of the main points that stand out that you thought something's going to work? You basically made a mistake, right? And it didn't turn out the way that you wanted to turn out. Aaron, you wanna give that a go?
I was speaking before saying how when these sort of things come along, you look at the topic and sometimes you're like, or sometimes you're interested. And when this topic came up, it's like, how many hours have we got to talk about the mistakes that I've made? Yeah, look, I call them expensive lessons, by the way. They're not mistakes, and I've made a lot of them. It's just making sure that you can fund the expensive lessons so you can potentially go and try and make another one, if it succeeds or not. But, I mean, probably the biggest thing I look back on was, and it's kind of cliche, but when the growth of KX started to occur, there was 6 company studios. We just sold our first 3 franchises. Obviously, franchise fees were coming in, so I had a couple of $100,000, which was nice. But instead of reinvesting that back into KX Pilates, I looked outside of what was going on, kind of in the fitness industry. So the ballet bar method was getting some traction in America. Hot yoga studios were kind of everywhere. So I was like, hey, I had this massive vision that KX would be a group and Pilates would just be one kind of sub-brand. So then I opened a yoga studio, I opened a couple of bar studios, we trialed a cycle studio, we started doing retreats out of Bali, kind of just went everywhere. And I quickly learned that if your focus goes everywhere, then you can't really focus on anything. They just never ever got the attention. First of all, I was never passionate about any of the other external ones, so that didn't work, because I still do wake up and I'm passionate about what I do and jump to it. But and then if you're not focusing on it, obviously it doesn't have the chance. So quickly we realised that they were, and at the same time, KX Pilates was picking up some speed. So by the time, even if they did pick up speed, we would have been so much further ahead. So when we started nationally with KX Pilates, we started doing a few things in Melbourne. It didn't really work, so we kind of shut them down, rebranded, sold them off, and just focused. So my question has always been, if I focused and put that investment back in and my energy back in, where would we be today? So, but saying that, it taught me a really good lesson about innovating outside versus innovating inside your business. And now, as I'm kind of sit as head of innovation now, and that's all we're focusing on is what can we do to make KX Pilates better? And the results have been really good. So,
right. Fiona, what about you? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I'd agree with Aaron that they're rather than mistakes, they are expensive lessons, and you need to be able to swallow your pride, and there needs to be enough money in the bank to be able to allow for them and pick back up and keep going. We lost a bit of focus as well after we landed a sizable fundraise last year. Some of the people on my team that previously had been fantastic, it kind of changed their mindset a little bit, and they thought, yeah, we can coast now. And I did a very expensive hire of somebody who I shouldn't have. So I hired a marketing director, and that didn't work for us. That person's background looked amazing on paper, and as it turned out, could not pivot a corporate sensibility to a startup such as ours, and we paid dearly for that So I'm just coming out of a walking through the valley of the shadow of death 6 months. I look cheerful because I love my product, our product. I believe in it so much that it didn't kind of matter what double, triple bend back I had to do to hurl this thing up the mountain. I was going to do it. And as it is, at the end of that valley of the shadow of the death, we are much leaner, faster, and doing the best sales we've ever done. So I call it like burning off the dross. Sometimes you go through these things and you have to find out or clarify what you don't really need in order to know what you really do need to drive your business forward.
Right. This is probably the last question that I want to ask all panelists, and then we'll go with, because I want to cover a lot of topics. What about on this point? What about you, Almer? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, we had this idea that we're going to build this business and it's going to be self-service. So we're never going to talk to anybody. We're never going to have any sales reps, and you're going to pay by credit card. Okay, and we built, and so we had this button on the website that was like start free or whatever it said at the time, and then you'd go into the product and use it. You'd know how to use it because it's super intuitive, and then you just pay us money. And turns out we guessed all of those things wrong. So first of all, we realized that it was nowhere near intuitive enough for anybody to just figure out how to use. So that's a whole thing, a whole other story. It turns out that actually the companies that were interested in what we were doing, the problem we were solving, which we didn't even know how to explain at that point, were big companies, and they don't whip out a credit card, nor do they go on your site, nor do they do a free trial. And so basically we had this like interesting thing in the wrong wrapping paper. And so these big companies came along and said, hey, this is interesting, but most of them realized we're just not ready for them, but a few of them were quite motivated, and that's where we got traction from bigger companies. And then we realized, okay, bigger companies, they buy differently. They make you go through procurement. They care about risk. They want their data stored in their own country. They want you to have insurance. They want you to be secure. They want all these things. The buyer's not the user. The user's 60 other people. And it's just like a whole different company. It's a different product. It's a different sales process. And they want to talk to people. They don't actually want to like go online and whatever. And there's definitely a consumerization of the enterprise happening, but by and large, it's a different. And so what we had to do was respond to the market and say, okay, we thought the traction was going to come from lots and lots of small companies doing small deals, but actually it's going to come from fewer companies doing big deals, and actually we need to organize our shit very differently, basically, and what we call button up for the enterprise. And we did all that, and we still think that we're going to longer term have lots and lots of small businesses, but it has to be organized very differently, and it's going to take longer, but the early adopters are big companies. So because we guessed wrong in the beginning, we had to go through, like, there was an opportunity cost of not getting, like you mentioned, how much quicker could we have grown instead, but also we had to like invest in all these things to be enterprise ready. And that's just an expensive mistake. And I lose sleep over, could we have avoided it? Could we have done better research, known this, known that? But at the end of the day, some of this is kind of like, fumbling your way through in the dark and guessing wrong, but being really quick and ruthless about identifying the mistakes and not worrying about sunk costs. If it was wrong, stop doing it and start doing the right thing. And that's, I think, one of the key skills of a founder, is to be able to identify that, not have any ego or pride about it, and say, actually, we made a shit decision, we're going to stop and now make the right decision. That's it. And corporates, what they do is continue with the sunk cost, and they get wedded to that. And if you don't react quickly, then the money's going to run out very quickly.
Right. Usually somebody gets fired in corporates
and in startups sometimes.
Yeah. Well, startups they get fired a lot more.
The CEO.
Fair enough. Let's flip the coin, and I want to know if there definitely has been mistakes, as you mentioned. Have there been any silver bullets, meaning something that you thought it's not going to work, but it worked amazingly well, or you kind of came across it by accident. Has that happened? Maybe Fiona, if you could shed some light.
I've got two, Shaheen. One was from Arts Hub days when I founded that with my technical co-founder in 2000. And literally we had an arts management consultancy. You'll remember the GST came in, and as that was on its way in, a bunch of contracts that we had that were council contracts, they just didn't know how the impact of the GST was going to fall for them. So they just cancelled their contracts. So we had like $100,000 of future revenue for this two-person consultancy just wiped out. And I hadn't been that keen on the consultancy anyway. With my background at ABC Radio, I was one of those nerds who actually uploaded via satellite my program material into my friends' show in Cairns, right? Just because we could, and no one used ABC Sat 2. You know, it was sitting there, so we used it. So for me, I wanted to be online. I had an early email address and access to abc2.net.au. I could see where the internet could go, and I was wondering why we were doing this consultancy, you know. And so I said to my partner, look, how about you get off the phone and stop giving advice to all your friends around the country about arts talent, and you just write up those jobs instead of giving them advice on who could do the job. Write it up and let's do a little website and create a jobs list just around arts jobs. So we did that, and we had a list that we emailed to our 17, that was the total of customers we'd had at that point, 17 consultancy customers. And across 6 months, we asked people to join the list if they liked it. And we had 3,500 within 6 months. And then October 25th, 2000, we turned off the free list and we had a full site, and 1,000 of those converted from that email list into paid customers. And that's what got the Arts Hub community away, which I thought at the time, it was very fraught because, you know, you just don't know whether it's going to work, and you have a baby and you have all these responsibilities. But it did work. It went fabulously well, and it created a new business. And a second one is an EdSmart one, and this is probably, you know, you can get really data driven, but you can be the opposite as well, which is, I'll give you an example in point. In our market, we deal with a lot of ICT managers, and they do like the data and they do like the metrics. They also like a good story. And we had a network that we had on the hook, and I was on the phone to them, but the night before I'd been up all night with a hospital in Bangkok because my son had fallen ill with appendicitis in a remote village in Laos. Two teachers drove him to Vientiane, to the Australian Embassy and to the Laos Hospital, and under no circumstances did the embassy say, should you allow the operation to occur in Laos. So the insurers decided he had to be flown immediately to Thailand for emergency surgery. So he was, and through the night I was giving permissions for all sorts of medical procedures, including for my poor son, a bariatric enema, which he spoke to me about later. And the thing was, I had this network customer on the phone, and he said to me, look, we're going to put this tender out for a product like yours, and we're checking out a company in the UK, company US, and you guys, and you sound really great. And I said, well, we can't do a tender. We're a two-man band. And he goes, but I love your technology. And I said, okay, well, you'll have to find another way then. And I have to go and get my taxi and go to the airport and go and meet my son. So as it was, I think it was the urgency in that phone call, the fact that I went through something that his boss, who was in charge of compliance at this large network of 160 schools, what kept her up at night was all these things that could go wrong out on excursion, out on this school venture, and that we had the empathy and the compassion to see it from their side because we'd lived it. Wow. Lived experience and sharing it, being willing to share, I think.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's quite a story. And your son all good?
Oh, he's fantastic.
Okay.
Going to Monash, he's really good. He's really good.
That's great. Aaron, what about you? Silver bullets. Anything comes to mind?
Yes, so I think it all comes down to a lot of it timing and luck. But we were in just the start of the second year in business, 2011, and everyone remembers obviously Groupon. I think at the time Spreets had just sold for like 40-something million after 10 months, which didn't go well for them when they went to collect their money. But so the buying platforms were massive, and basically our bullseye client is a 33-year-old young professional female, but we range anywhere between 16-year-old going to the studios with her mum, or all the way up to a 55 to 65-year-old woman who does KX once to 4 times a week, sort of thing. So, and a lot of these databases were our target client between the 20 and 45, and it was great because at the time boutique fitness wasn't around in 2010, so we were kind of, apart from your yoga studios, we were kind of on the frontier of that, which I had to, and plus it was a new style of fitness, so I had to re-educate people. Not to mention that I had no experience in business in the past and failed finance, accounting and all that rubbish. So I was useless at business when I opened my doors, but I was a good trainer. So I knew that if I got them in my doors, I could make them come back. I was confident that I could make them come back with the experience and the connection that I could have with people. So, but it was just getting them in the doors that I wasn't that successful with. So, we were slowly growing each month, but I remember we opened in February. The following January, we did a group deal. And it was something like $30 for 5 sessions or whatever, and they took like $25 of it, so you basically got nothing, but it filled the studio. And their database at the time were between 30,000 and 70,000. So, the logo got out to Melbourne, the new style of fitness got out to everyone, and all of a sudden our studio was full. Our revenues doubled in a month, and then just stayed and kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger because, as I said, the experience was there and people were loving it, and they couldn't go to get the experience anywhere else because there was no competing studios and there was nothing of the like back then. So that was kind of where we set off. Then that kind of led into Studio 2. One of my trainers came to me and said, I want to get involved. So that was Studio 3, 4, 5 in the following 12 months. So that's kind of the silver bullet for us. But at the same time, I was in a Young Entrepreneurs business group back then, and I was kind of the pin-up boy for this, hey, get involved with this group buying platform. But it failed for so many people because if you were like a hairdresser or a personal trainer and you were dropping your price from, say, $100 for a you call it a haircut? I call it a haircut, but what do you? So like for a cut and colour sort of thing, cut and colour, yeah, whatever. They were dropping it to like 15, $20, so they couldn't survive. And all of a sudden they sold 2,000 of these vouchers and they were like, well, I'm stuffed for the next 6 months and working for nothing. And the thing about that was you could just go get a $20 cut and colour and then go get another voucher for next door, and you're not loyal. But no one could go anywhere else for us, which was awesome, and it worked. So that's how we kind of opened the next 10 studios. So we used to do a group deal before the studio even opened. So then on the day of opening, we would have a full studio of 400 clients coming that week. Yes, they were paying us nothing. Obviously, we negotiated our rates higher, so we ended up getting about a 50% rebate back. But and that's kind of what happened. And then we transferred that into Facebook ads when Facebook came along with their business ads. So then we pushed them away. We did the same deals of $30 for 5 sessions, but we kept it all and kind of made from there. So it was a good transition. So that was definitely the silver bullet for us.
Gotcha. I want to talk about sales because obviously it's a channel that a lot of people use for growing their company, and it's a very tricky channel of getting it right. And you mentioned, Omer, transitioning from not wanting to speak to anyone to now we need salespeople because we're dealing with enterprise. Have you made any mistakes looking at hiring sales team, or even the first steps of putting a sales team together?
Yes, lots and lots of them.
Can you share any with us?
Yeah, so the first challenge we had was, so most salespeople, they want to come into a company that has a playbook, that has a process so that they know what to do. And they typically are divided into 2 groups, farmers and hunters, or SDRs, so sales development reps, people who like get leads, and leads can come from marketing as well. Or farmers are people who kind of receive or closers, so people who receive existing leads and then work with the clients to close a deal. And we had no sales process. We didn't know how to explain our value proposition. We didn't know who we're selling to. And so literally anybody who we would have hired would have been the wrong person, because we didn't know what we didn't know what to tell them, and we didn't know what kind of salesperson they needed to be. So we needed someone who is what we call a Renaissance salesperson, someone who can come in and figure things out and develop a playbook. And that's a very small sample of people. And the problem with sales reps is they like to get paid. And how do you define a comp plan when you don't know how much you're going to sell, and you don't know if you're going to sell 10 small deals or one big deal and when it's going to come? So in that uncertainty, it's very hard to build a sales operation. And so what we did was we found someone who we brought on as an advisor, and we said, look, we've got something that a few people have used and liked, but we need to figure out if it can be sold and to who and what's it worth and what's someone prepared to pay for it. And we've got to figure that out. And the unit economics don't matter at that point. We just need to understand, like, is there demand for this thing that we've built? And through that, we educated ourselves. I mean, now I can sort of reel off stats around comp models and all this kind of stuff. I can build it from scratch. But back then, we knew nothing. And we decided to run a bunch of experiments with different salespeople that had different skills and try different things and see what does outbound email work, does cold calling work, does inbound work, does this work, does that. And now we have a sales process. We know days to close, conversion rate. We know everything. It's all data. We use Salesforce. Everything's measured. We know what our sales process looks like outside the product and inside the product. We know everything. But we didn't then, and we had to make sure that we hire people who can build that, and they're different from the people who can then just come in, pick that up, and execute that. I think that's really important to understand, like, where are you at? Are you figuring things out, or have you figured out who you're selling to and how, and then you hire to that? And they're just very different things. And then the next is, like, what channels? So are you using marketing to get leads and getting salespeople to close? You're getting full stack people who get their own leads, like they're cold calling and closing. And there are so many resources. You can read books on it. Predictable Revenue is a good book. That's the Salesforce model on how to build sales teams, and you can educate yourself. And I also spoke to CEOs who built sales teams and VPs of sales at successful SaaS companies to understand what they've done, and then I educated myself so that I could do this. But you got to fumble your way through it, but you have to really, really dig in and educate yourself on a function that essentially has a lot of methodology and is very quantifiable.
Gotcha. And I'd love to get your insight on that as well, Fiona, and then maybe we'll take a couple questions from...
We have a sales process now, but it was, I'm completely with you, Omer, it was a long-term coming and figuring out, and we did have to figure that out ourselves, but we have a much... we sort of follow more of a scaffold structure than a really formulaic structure. I've got to say that our playbook is not to get locked into the playbook. But to have enough capacity to pivot once we've run out of steam with a particular way of going about things. Having said that, we've got a sales process. But I've got the Renaissance. Both myself and my salesperson are Renaissance people. We figure it out. We work out when something's no longer working. We pivot that out, and we swap in something else. So the scaffold, I say you can rip one leg of the scaffold out and put something new in when that's no longer working. And for me, I think playbooks are all very good, but there comes a point, having scaled Arts Hub in any business, that the strategies and the process you used up until a point no longer work, that you've run out of legs and you have to do something different. I think it's really key to work out when that's coming, when you're approaching it. And you're approaching it, things are really, really good. You're throwing off lots of cash. You don't really necessarily see it coming. If you're throwing off a lot of cash, sometimes it's good to just look at your options and see if you can broaden who it is and how you go about things, who it is you target and how you go about things.
Right. Okay. I want to come back and come back to your point that you raised, because in the previous question you talk about how you jumped on the the Groupons and you ride that wave, and then you talked about Facebook and whether advisors and mentors have any play, because you also mentioned a community that you're part of, the startup advisors. I think you mentioned something. Yeah, I definitely want to come back to that. But before we come to that question, let's take a couple of questions from here. What is the cost of a bad hire?
Enormous.
Who wants to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give data on it if that's helpful.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I think that you would be the best person.
Yeah, so it's typically 2.5 times salary. That's a kind of, I mean, it really varies by company, but the things that come into a cost of a bad hire is, so there are the quantifiable costs of, whether you pay for an ad or a recruitment agency and those kind of things. There is the time to fill, so how long do you have without a person in the role? And then there's the lost productivity around the impact, so how long does it take to train a new person, get them ramped? And in sales, it's typically 3 to 6 months to get a sales rep ramped in the enterprise. So just think every time you lose one, there's a 6 month setback, massive. But then there's also the impact that it has on the team and the tax on the recruitment team to continue to replace as opposed to grow. So it's just enormous, and it's actually the biggest problem in recruiting and the least understood problem. So most people are trying to solve other problems except for bad hire, because it's very hard to identify what's involved. So most of the recruitment solutions out there are trying to alleviate recruiter pain, like make it faster or make manual stuff automated. But actually this is the problem. The companies are hiring the wrong people, and they're at 30% turnover and they should be at 10. And so yeah, there are a lot of things that can be avoided, not all, because it's a game of information asymmetry, and until you've worked with someone for a year you don't fully know, but you can get a lot closer to that with a good hiring process, and there's some missed opportunities in that area. Yeah.
Gotcha. Shall we take one more question? What kind of company is suitable to follow a franchise model, and when do we decide to franchise? That's
Yep. Great question. Not all businesses are franchisable, no matter what other people will tell you. And even if you've got a really popular business, that doesn't necessarily mean it's franchisable either. So it all comes down to the numbers, which I'm terrible at. But you pay really good people who are great at numbers to actually roll it all out and mimic it as a franchise. Another big mistake people make is you need to prove the model, but you need to prove it over time. So awesome if you can have one concept that does really, really well, and people will buy off the back of that, which is great. Some people then go, okay, I'm going to replicate that to 3 to 5, which is a smart move, but if it doesn't work, then you're screwed, because you've got to show them the averages of all 3, which even if one is dominating and one is losing money, then obviously comes up. And that's what at the end of the day, the amount of hype that someone can give you about how much they love your business, they're going to get advice, their accountant's going to tell you the business sucks and don't get involved, and then their hype just goes to nothing, because obviously they're in it to still make money, even though they might love your brand. So, a good friend of mine started a business that 1 was doing really well, 2 and 3 pulled it all down. She was looking to franchise it, no one wanted to buy. So that's basically stagnated and about to sell off. But if she didn't open those other 2, potentially it could have been a huge success. Or if she just concentrated on 1, or who kind of knows. But just the first thing to know is that you need to prove the model. You need time. I think the biggest mistake as well people make in this day and age is starting something and then wanting to flog it off and multiply it by 50 in the next 2 years. Franchising is a massive long game. They say in franchising you don't make money until 7 years, and you're just reinvesting back, because you make money in the first 0 to 30, or in my experience anyway, which I can talk about. 0 to 30, you make money, but you're the owner operator. From 30 to whatever it is now, 60 for us, you're reinvesting everything to grow your head office team. So there's all of your profits going back into salaries, growing, then comes into bad hires, people stuffing your business up and starting from scratch again. and you're always then plugging in people to like business development managers to help the network grow as well. And it only really gets to the stage of say 70 plus units where money starts coming in. So even now, like we just turned a profit in the franchising entity because we have company studios as well last financial year. And that was my choice though to reinvest because we were looking, we're on a good growth path. But I say to people, if you just want to franchise with 30 and you want to stay involved as the head, awesome. If you want to go bigger, then and you need to hire people, CEO, hired a CEO 9 months ago, they're not cheap. So yes, I could still be in there, and yes, I could be getting her salary, but I've chosen a different path and pulled out, and she's way better at doing what she's doing than I was. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it definitely does.
Speak to people who have done franchising first. And you need to get your model right as well. There's so many different models in franchising. There's fixed fee, there's percentages, your royalties you've got to get right. So at KX we have an 8% royalty and a 2% marketing. The 2% because we're small revenue studios. So you're looking at the average booth studio earns $1 million a year. So 2%'s not bad. A KX earns between 350 and 600. So that drops it in half straight away. So 2% was nothing for us. And we want to be on top of the game and top of the industry. So I had to change my marketing fund two years ago. And what do you think my owners like? They didn't like me that time when I basically told them that their marketing fund was doubling to 4%. Next time they signed for their second 5 years, they wanted to shoot me. So the new guys coming on board know no different, so it's not a problem. But that's the, and it's a relationship piece, and you cannot fire franchisees. So sometimes it's actually worth opening far less, but owning them all yourself. So again, you need to model it out.
Right.
I could speak about franchising for forever, but it's a really fascinating business model.
Sounds good. Can we talk about now mentors and advisors?
Sure.
I'd love to hear if that has been part of your journey, being mentored or bringing advisors on board. What has been your experience on that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I knew nothing about business. I actually opened the doors of my first studio and no one came in the first day because I didn't know what a pre-sale was. As I said, I was a great trainer. I had five years experience in Pilates in the industry and 10 years in fitness with personal training, etc. I knew nothing about anything to do with running a business. And I was so anal and focused on making this studio look so awesome that I just did nothing else. So I opened the doors, I was like, yes, it looks awesome. And by the way, it looked fucking terrible to what our studios look now, but I thought it looked awesome. So kind of the understanding that I had no idea was like, how do I find out? And that's when I just started networking, talking to as many people as I can. It's really good that the Young Entrepreneurs group that I was involved in was the Entourage back then, but the Entourage back then was very, very different. I was in the first Entourage group in Melbourne. There were 6 businesses, and we were in Morello's brother's back office in Flemington in his real estate firm. Like, it was like personal attention. We'll bring all of our problems onto the table. They might have got a speaker in now and again. Now it's a different beast, and if you know it, I'm sure a lot of you do. But a completely different beast that has positives and negatives attached to it. But that taught me everything because I knew nothing about business. So it taught me everything to do with marketing, digital, operations, social media. Every single thing you can think about business, accounting. All the stuff that I was no good at and I hated almost. I learnt what I could do, what I couldn't do, what to outsource, what to delegate, etc., etc. So that's how that started in the first year, which taught me like the basis of business, which I literally applied everything. And if it didn't work, I just threw it out. Okay, give me something else. Give me something else. And then from there, it was always going to people who had been there and done that in the space of either franchising. The franchising industry is fantastic in Australia. It's full of old dogs now, but they're so willing to give back every single thing they've learnt. I sat on the franchisor board of Melbourne for a couple of years. I'm sitting around 65 plus year olds, but they've been in franchising for 30 years. And every single thing you bring onto the table, yes, I run Pilates studios, but franchising is franchising. You're always dealing with people, you're always dealing with problems. It's the same shit, it's just a different business. So just the feedback that I got from that. I had a business advisor for probably 2 years. So he had experience in a 24/7 gym chain taking it international. which was fantastic. And it really pushed me. The hardest thing as well is being accountable as well when you're at the top of who's pushing you, who's telling you, have you done this, because if you don't want to do it, you just don't do it. So I was lucky, I loved my business and I was passionate about it, but going back 10, 15 years, like studying and stuff, I was the biggest procrastinator in the world. So you need someone on your tail, you need someone setting goals and different ideas. We're just about to create an advisory board at the moment at KX to bring smarter people than us in as well with different experiences. So always going out, networking and speaking. And it's so easy just to go, hey, can I buy you a coffee, and pick their brain. And I do it as well. People contact me and I'm like, yeah, I'll happily give back and tell you all the mistakes not to make that I did. Yeah. So 100%. And that will never change. So the whole idea about constantly learning, improving, ongoing improvement, as I said before, it's all of the KX values and philosophies kind of come through my personality. But if you think you're at the top, you think you've earned it, it's a very arrogant ideal because you can never stop learning.
Gotcha. That's amazing. Fiona, what about you? Have you had
some terrible mentor experiences?
That's good. We want to hear about those.
Really awful. When we landed our funding, part of the condition was that we had a board, and so I had to get used to working with a board, and it probably would have been preferable we had an advisory board, in all honesty, and we need to look at that. But one of the board members suggested someone that she knew who'd be a great mentor, and I felt obligated to actually listen to advice from board members and follow it through. And I joined this mentor group, and I've got to say, I'll be really blunt, it was this chick who had been a psychologist, had been a recruiter as well, who had this niche group of guys mainly, and she could behave as Madame Lash with them. So, beat them into shape once a month in a, half a morning session. And she'd seen the writing on the wall that there were many more women in business, and also a diminishing market for the kinds of men she liked to keep under her control. So I joined this group and it was horrible. It was the most strange experience, and it was just terrible. It was a terrible waste of money, but more it was a waste of emotional energy. You think you're trying to get some help on your business issues, you get them on the table, and then people just pile in to tell you how bad and how dumb you are. That was so bad.
That's really
so bad.
It's really good insight because there are a lot of business advisor out there that they claim to know how to run a business and how to help you and how to get you to the next step. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to identify whether you should listen to these people or not. And Amr, I know that you are really big on advisors as well. And you mentioned you've reached out to people when you were putting the sales team together, and a couple other areas that we previously spoke about. Do you have a process, like if you wanted to bring in an advisor or you're looking for a mentor, do you have a process of mitigating that risk of communicating with the wrong person or getting advice from the wrong person?
So firstly, just the distinction, the way I see a mentor is someone to help you individually, and an advisor is to the company, and typically they would get options so that they care about the company, and it's a professional relationship, and we treat it like any relationship, whether it's an employee or an investor, so there's an agreement. The way we seek out advisors is to solve a specific problem, so we want people who have expertise in an area that is important to us, so sales, go-to-market, product, technology, whatever, and we're actually adding to our advisory board right now, and the particular problem we want to solve now is talent acquisition industry expertise, so we want someone very senior, very credible in the industry, leading a people function, essentially someone who's our user, who's our buyer. And the way that we do that is, so we start either with our network or we observe people in the market. Maybe we heard them on a podcast or read something, and we then approach them, and I've done that before. and say, hey, I liked what you had to say, can we have a conversation? And from that point, it's like any relationship. We talk about our mission, and we expect that it'll immediately resonate with them, and if not, it's over. So we're not interested in anyone unless they immediately, their eyes light up about, oh, this is awesome, I love what you're doing. Otherwise, no relationship will work for us. And so because if you think about an advisor, there's only two reasons they would do it. The first is, typically it's people who, they don't need money, they're very established, they're running their own businesses, or they're very senior in companies. This is an extra thing for them, so they're not going to waste their time. So they have to care, and they have to be interested and excited about what you're doing. And second, you have to make them care about the company being successful, and you do that through equity. And so once we've identified that they have the skills that we need, that they care about our mission and our values and what we're doing, then it's a very instinctive, personal, do we like each other? Do we want to spend time with each other? And if so, you can sort of progress from there. And so that's been really, really successful for us. And we've got 3 advisors and adding a 4th, and they've all contributed in many, many ways, from founder therapy to introductions to advice and expertise to or mitigating risk, and they work together. We have a Slack channel that's our advisory board Slack channel, so that we can all kind of share ideas. It's been really good for us.
For the founder therapy one, what kind of problem would you say you have, and how would you approach someone for that?
How long have we got? So I think you got to remember that everyone has a vested interest. So an investor, they're not your friend. They care about getting a return. Now, they can be enormously helpful and friendly, but at the end of the day, there's something in the back of their mind that's going, oh, are you up for this? Is this going to work out for me? Employees also, you can't scare them. You can't air all the dirty laundry. It's a lonely job, and there's not a lot of people you can talk to. Now, advisors absolutely have a vested interest, so they're not the priest and they're not your partner, but they're one step removed. So they're not on your board, they're not in a governance role, and they didn't invest their money. So they're in a better position to care, but without judging you. And so I feel that our advisory board's a safe place that we can air some problems and say, oh, this customer is, not paying, or, this, we can't raise capital, whatever, like the things that you not necessarily you don't want to talk about openly, but like the holy shit moments that happen, 3 times a day as a founder. And you're not going to raise all of them, but like, once a month you might choose one that like you're really sweating over and say, what the hell, have you seen this before? How do you think about, how should we be thinking about this problem? And every time I've done that, I've not been disappointed. Every single time, they've either helped through it, or they've introduced us to people we should talk to help us to work through the problem. Highly recommend it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I got one last question. We're in the last couple of minutes, but and that's regarding resources and material that you've come across, in the past that you've really gained a lot from reading them, listening to them, blogs, podcasts, books, whatever it is. But before we get to that question, I want to take a couple more questions from the audience. So, have you made a mistake with choosing a co-founder? What did you learn? So, have you had co-founder issues? Have anyone had that experience?
No. I founded my retreats company with a friend of mine in Bali that didn't work out well. But it didn't work out well in the sense that we're no longer business partners, but it kind of worked well at the time of the splitting. And it was just mixed visions, I suppose, for the company. I saw the retreats company as a bolt-on to KX Pilates, where we could take our clients over to overseas destinations, 4 to 6 times a year as just an added bonus. And if you spend like 7 days with someone, training a couple of times a day with them, eating with them, you really form strong connections, and then you bring a brand into that, then the connection is with the brand as well. And even clients who weren't even KX clients before they got there, they might have been dragged on with a friend, they left like screaming the masses how awesome and how connected they felt with KX. But his idea, and again, my clients, as we talked about the age group they were, he was in it he went on surf trips previously and kind of came up with the idea. So the idea came to me, and I had obviously the clients in the brand. But he wanted a 18 to 25-year-old like Kentucky party fitness thing, which is not what I wanted. And I had a girlfriend who's now my wife, and he was single, which, surprise, surprise. And the number one rule when I sat down with him is, you don't touch clients. That's always been a rule since the very early days. You can finish the rest. So, but at the end of the day, it was like, he got some of his people on it. My clients were like, who the hell are these sort of people? They're not kind of in the same boat. So, it was just me turning around saying, it's not working. We want completely two different things. And it was unfortunate at the time that we split right down the line in terms of social media. I got Facebook, he got Instagram. I took my brand back and didn't do anything for 12 months, but it was the rise of Instagram. So he just, and to his success, he's done really, really well. And he's running 20 to 50 retreats a year around the world. His trainers are Instagram sensations of minimum 100,000 followers. So he did a huge, but I never wanted that. So, and the focus of, it sounds really luxurious, but you do like 2 of them in a row, and then you just want to come back to your normal life. So it was just not for me, but he loves it. And, he lives half his life in Bali and half his life in Noosa, and he married his yoga instructor. He's doing really well. Hats off to him and all the success. But it's just the classic case of sitting down and going, and it was kind of hard because it was almost like a rejection thing, as you don't want to work with me. So he took it a little harder than I did. But at the end of the day, and it was 50-50, which never works. And like we used to argue, what actually got us was the website loaded and the video played straight away of this retreat. Blurring music, bang, bang, everyone exercising, whatever. And I was like, women are sitting in their office on their desk and this thing just goes like this to you. And I was like, you can't let it play automatically. You need to be able to press the play button. And we just went bang. And we just couldn't make a decision. So I just went, I'm done. We can't. That was the stupidest thing ever that I was like, if you can't understand that. He's like, no, it's awesome because it's going to blur and then all the other girls are going to look up and go, what's that? And I was like, you don't get it. You don't get it. So yeah, ended that. But again, great time to end it. And, and it worked out well for both of us. I run my 4 to 6 and he runs his 20, and that's his main job, and that's my side things.
All right. Yeah. Misalignment and visions and videos. Let's take another one with 4 likes. How long did it take you to start your business from the moment you came up with the idea, and can you share the struggles you encountered? Who wants to? There's a lot in that question. So how long did it, let's go with that. How long, Amr, you want to maybe answer that? How long did it take? You came up with the idea and then you kind of materialized it.
So, yeah, I don't know how we're defining start the business, but I'll just make some assumptions. We probably spent a couple months, 2 or 3 months, kind of kicking around the concept and doing some research and forming the idea and writing some documents, and also getting aligned on some of the founder, like, do we have a shared, do we want to go into business together, and are we doing it to grow a big business or to sell something, or what's our vision? Do we have a shared vision for this activity? I think it took 2 to 3 months at the time, and then we started building. So fairly quick. It sounds crazy to people who are kind of like, how did you just decide now to completely change your life, quit your day job? But I don't know if that's, so to someone who's not in the startup game, that feels very quick, but to someone who's used to doing this, that's just normal. So that's probably the amount of time, and then we funded it with our own money in the beginning, and there was a period of time we were bootstrapped. And even then, I don't consider it to be a business. It was still like we were building something to see if it's something and using our own money. And then when we quit our jobs and raise capital, then it's like it's real now.
So you were working at the time?
Yeah, so working, doing this on the side, just had my son, just like everything going on at once. And then when I quit my job and sort of went public with this and raised capital, then it was like serious. It was real. Before that, it was like it was kind of like a side project that we were seeing. It's an experiment.
How long did that take? Quit your job?
So I think 6 or 9 months later, we did it for 6 or 9 months while working, and then quit when we got to a point where like we can get some customers, and then it's just very hard to moonlight.
All right.
Yeah, but everyone's different. It really depends what stage you're at as well. I don't think there's a formula for this stuff.
Let's talk about resources, and I know that we're kind of going over time. Fiona, you have any insight with regards to resources that you came across that has been really helpful in terms of the growth of the business and what do you call that has really helped you?
Yeah, so probably not the usual ones. So I read things like the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita and poems by Rumi. I just think it's really important as a founder to stay sane. So I read things that have nothing to do with business, but have to do with the human journey and the soul, because if you can turn up as your best self, you actually work out how to figure your way through whatever turns up the next day. So the resources I use are ancient literature. And I have a fascination for the Silk Road and all of the trade routes through China, Central Asia, through India. Yeah, they're my resources.
That's really cool. Basically putting emphasis on something completely different.
Something different.
Yeah. Aaron, what about yourself?
A real cliche one I read my dad gave it to me when I was 14 was Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that really resonated with me because my mum was the home economics teacher, and my father was in business, and he was always like, you need to start your own business, and my mum's like, you need to go and finish school and university and go get a job and go get a mortgage, and exactly what that book says. And my dad's like, you're not going to make it unless you own your own business. Luckily, I listened to my dad, thank God. I mean, I don't really read books now. It's funny when you see on those ads, the average CEO reads whatever it is a year. Some people need that. I would probably say my education is through entrepreneur groups. I forgot to mention before, I've been a part of entrepreneurs organisation since 2014, which has been amazing for me. Just the calibre of people that I've met, the mentors in that, and the people who have been there and done that experience. So that's how I get my learnings. I kind of read through half a book. I read like I think it's called Rocket Man. I think it's the only book I've read this year. I didn't even finish it, I don't think. But that was about the dynamics between a founder and a CEO, which I thought was kind of cool. And kind of just the cliche books I've read in the past, that they're kind of really good, like the E-Myth, all that sort of stuff. Podcasts, so I ran a marathon a couple of months ago, and literally podcasts got me through my training. Tony Rock, I was an overweight kid in my teenage years, and kind of fitness changed my life, which is how I got into it. And I was listening to Tony Robbins when I was 15, kind of in that sort of stage when my old man was throwing me that book. For personal power and stuff. So I listen to a lot of his podcasts. I just have something about his voice that just fires me up. And I've been listening to a lot of stuff where he talks to like Olympians and stuff like that. And I just find that fascinating of how these guys can just go out and do the exact same thing day in, day out, and just the focus and the consistency and the persistence. That's what success is. So it's just to replicate. I think if you look at any successful sportsman, a lot of them they're really well at business as well when they finish, because it's just the same dedication, focus, commitment, learning. Tim Ferriss, I'm really kind of mainstream. I don't really go out and look at most stuff because the stuff I find works for me. So.
No, amazing. Love it. Amr, what about yourself?
Yeah, so there are 4 main groups that I kind of get my knowledge from. So the podcast, absolutely, and I have a dog. So when I'm walking the dog, I'm either on the phone or listening to podcasts or books. So I listen to the SaaS to Podcast 20-minute VC. So if you're in SaaS or if you raise venture, they're very relevant.
What were they again? Just in case.
SaaStr, the SaaStr podcast, and 20-Minute VC. They're both Harry Stebbings is the host, but SaaStr in particular, if you're into sort of fast growth startup journey. Books, but I listen, so I have an Audible subscription, listen to books, and The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz is a great example, and I listen to books about personal my own growth. So there's a book now called Range, How Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World, which made sense of my whole life, or books about specific topics. So that's the second one. The third one is I talk to people and get advice. I get energy from people, not necessarily a group, but one-on-one. So I other founders, and that's just the best. That's the only people who know what you're really going through. So we catch up and coffee and beer, and just like you can talk freely and feel safe. And then my wife, who just seems to, without knowing 90% of the facts, just seems to land at the right answer. So I'll just say to her, like, all this shit happened today, and she'll just say one thing. I go, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? But that's because she knows me and she can read the situation. And so it's also good to have a person who's removed from, not removed from you, intimately close to you, but removed from the nonsense and the noise and the crap. And it can be a friend, it can be a parent, whatever it can be. But just kind of has a really healthy dose of common sense and a bullshit filter, and can just say to you, well, why haven't you fired that person? You've been whinging about that person for 6 months. I'm sick of hearing about it. And sometimes that's that, like, well, that's the reason. You don't need any more reasons to. So that's kind of, that's where I get my inspiration and knowledge. But I will say that I'm constantly consuming, constantly reading and listening, every single day of my life at the gym, and I'm constantly educating myself, and I've had to become a subject matter expert in things I knew nothing about because I'm a founder and we can't hire all these people, so I've had to become. So educating yourself is a pursuit that will pay off every single time, and it's necessary if you're going to if you're in the company making business, you have to continue to do that because you just don't know what is going to happen.
I kind of do the opposite. I empty out. I mean, I think I gathered so much data, and I'm a bit older, that I'm now emptying out. It's like if I can clear my mind, I can solve the biggest problems, and I've solved some really big ones recently. I think there's a time to gather in and to gather knowledge, and there's a time to prune. So I think I'm a bit more, yeah, that might be the way you do things, but it's not the only way. I think I'm more of like, okay, I've got a good filtering system now. I've got a good BS system. It's time to empty out, open up, take a really creative look at things.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Now, there's one thing, if we could go back to the previous slide, there's one thing that I have not discussed with the panel members, and I cannot promise because I haven't discussed it. But I want to try with this thing if it works. And the top 4 questions that we didn't get to answer, we are going to try to answer them in our Slack channel. So we have a Slack channel that you can become part of. growthcolony.org/Slack, and you could join that, and we are going to try to answer the top 4 questions that are raised in this evening that we didn't get a chance to answer. So we will be answering that, so make sure you join our Slack channel, and we'll go through this. On that note, just please help me thank the panel for all the amazing answers. Thank you so much. Now, our next event is, we haven't announced the next event. The next event is a webinar that we have on intent-based marketing and the development of that here in Australia. It's a new field in Australia. It's been around in the US for a couple of years and it's matured. So if you're interested, definitely log in, sign up for the webinar, and it's going to be with Greg Anderson, VP of Sales of APAC Tech Target. They are probably one of the, if not, I don't want to say the biggest, but they're one of the biggest players in the B2B marketing in the US. So if you find that interesting, definitely sign up, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. On that note, we're going to be around, so please feel free to grab a drink, and we'll be around to do a little bit of networking. And thanks again for coming tonight. Thank you.